Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And you have myself, Stephen George. Very good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 9th of February 2014. Good evening, and I think what we'll do is have a quick weather check. You want to have a quick look out the window, or you've just come in?
I've just come in. It's cold out there. There's a nice clear sky. There's lots of action up there that you can see. Plenty of stars and planets and whatnot. Lovely clear sky this evening. Free of chemtrails, and it's cold. Very cold.
That's it. There you go. Advanced technology in our weather check. What can we say? Good evening and welcome. Right, okay, just to a few things we go through. Our guest on tonight is a chap called Andy Thomas. Andy is a prolific author and writer, and also does lectures, does an awful lot of lectures. And an all-round nice guy. We're going to be getting Andy in a few minutes' time. Andy has been on the show before. I think the last time he was on was around 2011. And even, that was only 3 years ago. A lot has changed since Andy has been on the show. So we look forward to touch base with Andy, and we'll have a chat with him. But just a few things, as usual, just a few things that we're going to go through. Yesterday we had a United We Strike Radio Marathon, the second of the month, as usual. And we had a great marathon. We went on. Myself and Steve did our show at 7 o'clock, and we had Simon the Spaniard on, and we did 30 minutes with Simon. Now, I know a lot of people out there like Simon and what he talks about. He's a brilliant guy, great information. So, after the show, or whenever you want to do it, if you want to pop over to unitedwestrike.com and go over to the podcast archive menu option, and you'll be able to just click on our show that we did with Simon. It's only about 30 minutes, but if you like what Simon talks about, you'll like that show as well. The other thing that I'm just going to touch base on is a report that went around during the week. Now, we've all heard about Neil Keenan, and we heard about Neil Keenan because he was involved with, or spoke with David Wilcock about putting liens on the banks. And I don't know whether you've seen this information during the week, but basically Neil Keenan reports that he says that the powers that war are in check, and it won't be long before it's checkmate to us. Now, I hope that's right, because we definitely need it. He says chemtrails 2.0 are now radioactive, and he says sons of bitches here on his comment. Doctor group counters developing a compound that will protect us. So obviously this doctor group counters, whatever that means, is developing an antidote to stop the radioactivity from the chemtrails affecting us. And also in Neil's video, he said he takes it into the next level as he exposes the cabal's radioactive chemtrails 2.0. He gives us hope with his announcement of medical compound that destroys the potency of their attempts to wipe out 85% of humanity. So what if they try and hunt Neil down? Well, they say if they do, he will release the Black Book, and many of the top-tier Kabbalists will be exposed, and they deeply fear exposure. Neil not only controls the Black Book and has had the book's codes translated, but he also has opened the private banking black screens, and he knows exactly who has done what. Now, I don't know how close we are, if we are at all close to it. We just that's what was said, so we're just reading out what was said. Hopefully, if Neil is doing that, and it is true, and we're near that time, it doesn't mean that we can kind of sit in our laurels and do nothing. It means that we should just keep pushing and keep pushing until we actually win. Basically, that's what I think. Anyway, what do you think, Steve?
I'm going to be the pessimist, so excuse me for being pessimistic. But I mean, we've heard a lot of stuff bandied around before about this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and okay, we haven't seen the chess one where it's check and checkmate. We haven't seen that before, but we have seen situations before where the jig was almost up. That's an Irish saying. It means like the whatever's going to be outed has just about to be outed. So yeah, we have heard this before. I don't know much about Neil or this Black Book that Neil has, but I would suspect that Neil is just one man. I'm guessing he's just one man, or maybe Neil is just a pseudonym for a big organisation. I don't know, but I mean, if it's one man with a Black Book, I mean, people have been taken out of the picture. We've seen it before. where people have been taken out. You know, they're going to expose something or they know something. I mean, only there yesterday today I seen there, and I believe it happened yesterday, I think, some high-ranking banker, ex-banker, or maybe he's a current banker, I don't know, but he was going to expose some stuff, and he committed suicide. Seemingly he killed himself with a nail gun 8 times. Seriously?
That's like the guy who committed suicide. He shot himself twice in the head.
Have you seen this though?
No.
No, I again, pinch of salt, because I don't know if it's genuine. But there was some information on the net about this guy. He's married. He's a banker. He had some information. He was going to blow the lid on something big. You know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something like what Neil knows here. I don't know. But he was found dead with a nail gun. I think in his garage. Or sorry, he's American. It was in his garage with a nail gun.
But
he had 8 nails in the head.
Well, that's probably about the 4th banker now, if not the 5th banker that's committed suicide or, you know, died in suspicious circumstances. I mean, there must be something coming down the line, because we obviously heard that Danske Bank, I think that's how you put my teeth in. Danske Bank is restricting access to the bank accounts to customers. Yeah. 10,000 customers have restricted access to the actual bank account. Now, I think they're leaving the UK, or maybe they're leaving Ireland or the UK, but they're leaving something anyway. And there just seems to be something in the pipeline regarding the banking system. And we're just going to have to be very careful. And we're going to be talking about dates as well. In a minute, I'm going to be talking about dates. The other thing as well, by the way, just to let you know that last night when we were doing the United We Strike Marathon, I was doing the producing. 10 minutes before I was going to switch over to over to America, we were attacked. Our internet got attacked, and the whole system came down. So obviously we're going to be very careful, and we're going to be looking at ways that we can stop things like that from happening. So if we do happen to go down tonight, it won't be due to us. It might be due to something else there. But the great thing is that we can still carry on and do our podcast and record it and put it up anyway. So, you know, they might, you know, so if somebody attacks a live show, it doesn't really make a difference, because we can carry on with the podcast and then we just put it up on the website. So, it doesn't seem logical attacking a live stream, because the recordings can still be done. But how's your week anyway, Steve?
Well, I'm just getting the. You can see Mary waving at me there from the booth. I think she wants to go home. Sorry, Mary. You wanted to say something?
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Yeah, sorry for keeping you so late. Yeah, she's out the door now on the way home. That's 046 927 1212 if you want to ring us in this evening. From outside the Republic of Ireland, it's 00353 469 271212. We're also going to be monitoring the People's Internet Radio chat room, and also our own chat room as well, which is on oymradio.com. Navigate to that site, pop onto the left hand side, you'll see the live chat button. Just click on that. You can join the guest room there and pour yourself a drink while you're in there. Drinks are free. It's ladies' night tonight at the OYM chat room. And pop your questions in there for our guest this evening, and we shall read them out.
Brilliant.
Alan.
Okay, well, is that your week?
No, that's not my week.
Okay.
How can that be my week?
Well, what's your week? Well, listen, that was great. Actually, that's surprising for us. We obviously have a few bits on tonight, so we did kind of miss that. Well done.
Well, Mary waving from the booth.
Mary, there you go, see?
She wanted to get out of here. Why does she have to go? We should just record her saying that. Why does she have to come in every week and say the same thing?
Yeah, exactly. We should.
I don't know.
Why don't we record it?
Why didn't we think of that?
Oh, well, there you go. So, yeah, tell us about your week.
Yeah, my week, not too much happening. I've been watching a few bits and pieces on the internet. Like the royal family. I had a laugh there. I read an article a couple of days ago about the royal family. Seemingly, the excrement is hitting the fan big time with the royal family. And Kate, I keep thinking Kate Moss. It's not Kate Moss. Kate, whatever her name is, Winslet. No.
Kate Winslet. Oh, she's an actress.
Whoever married your man.
Kate Middleton.
Middleton. There you go. Kate Middleton. Yeah, I believe she has left the country with the babog. They're gone to somewhere else. I don't know where they're gone. And I believe the Queen her cage has been rattled, and now they're introducing some bill or an act or a law. A veil of secrecy will be coming down over the royal family, so they will not be able to be scrutinised by the public. Have you heard that?
I have indeed, but unfortunately the horse has bolted. It's a bit too late now. There's information out there already released, and she's not going to hide from this one. They're not going to hide from this one.
But even if they get this veil of secrecy, surely if that comes down...
The information's out there. People have, I've read stories, and again, read stories, I don't know how true they are, but I've read stories of staff reporting about things that happened in Balmoral, allegedly, and obviously about them 10 kids that disappeared in the 60s when they went off on a picnic. Yeah. And there's a few other kind of question marks over the royals and what they've got up to. So, they're not squeaky clean, guaranteed.
Oh, I'm sure they're not. I mean, look, whoever's squeaky clean, raise your hand. What else has been going on? That thing, I was going to mention that actually on my week as well, that poor chap now who died, who committed suicide with the nail gun. I mean, I actually seen it on the net, and it was on some website. I'm not sure if it was the Huffington Post or it was one of these online newspapers, and it was brought to my attention, so I just read it as you do, and I started reading the comments afterwards, like what people were saying, and it was amazing because all the comments, like you read these things and all the comments, some are kind of going, he committed suicide and that's it, and anyone who says any different, you're a conspiracy theorist. But all the comments, 90% of the comments of what I read, they were all kind of going, how do you commit suicide with a nail gun 8 times? Surely one in the head is enough to do it, and after that, like when you get one in the head, your body will probably go into shock anyway. You wouldn't have time to do it 7 more times. And everyone the post was kind of saying, very suspicious circumstances. Looks like murder and definitely not suicide, and it was on and on and on. But I mean, it's sad to see people dying that way because they have some information or they know some information or they're going to share some information. I think what ought to be done is, I mean, even when we're talking with Neil here with the black book, if this black book is enough to, send some people to jail or to right some wrongs or bring down a corrupt system, I don't think he should be using it as a pawn in a game and say, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. I think the information should be just made public, end of story. I don't know what your thoughts on that, but that's what I believe. If this information is going to benefit the public as a whole, the world as a whole, it should be just made public. And don't start going around making deals and saying, if you don't stop these chemtrails, I'm going to publish the book. Well, okay, we'll
just publish it.
We just take the radioactive material out of the chemtrails. Yeah. No, don't do that. That's just messing. Publish the damn book, and as I heard this saying before, let the chips fall where they may.
Exactly.
Don't know what it means, but I love it.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. That's fair comment.
That's about it. How's your week?
Not too bad. Just again, a couple of things. One of the things that you're going to see an awful lot on the internet, you have trolls and shills and all that kind of stuff. And the doomers and gloomers love giving out dates. I've been noticing on YouTube recently that everybody has a date for something. Starting off on the 15th of Feb 2014, then the end of the equinox in March 2014, then May week 3 2014, August 2014, September 27 2015, March 2016. Pick a date. This is the world is nigh, the world's coming to an end, and we have all these dates and people saying things are going to happen. So, we've had loads of dates before on OYM. We talked about it over the last few years, and I'm not saying that all them dates are duds, but all the dates that we have gone through for the last few years on OYM, nothing really has happened. Even the 21st of December. Now, nothing was supposed to happen on that date, 21st December 2012. Apparently it's just an energy change. But we probably will be talking to Andy about that anyway, because I think Andy has an interest on that. So we'll talk to Andy about that. And the last thing is, right, I got some information in from one of our listeners, Patrick. Thanks very much, Patrick. He gave me a phone call during the week, and he sent over a water treatment label. Okay? And the water treatment label was the label that's on the fluoride that goes in our water. And the label is from a company called Chemiflock Limited down in Shannon, County Clare. And I think Aisling knows them very well.
Oh, she does, yeah.
Yeah. Now, apparently, Patrick said...
I'm just going to move over beside you to have a look at that, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Have a look at that. I'll talk while you're looking. The person who passed the label onto Patrick, had a conversation with him. And they were making the storage tanks for the water, and they told him that splashes from the liquid had burnt holes in their overalls, and they had rashes. Okay? So this stuff is highly lethal, obviously. Aluminium sulfate, 8% liquid. And it's highly lethal. And yet we're putting that in our water. Now, if you want to see the label and a description of what aluminium sulfate is, for registered users, when you log in, if you're not a registered user, just log in for free, register for free, and you'll be able to go down to recent articles. There's a menu option that comes up saying recent articles, and if you go in there, you'll actually see the label and you'll read the information regarding what aluminium sulfate is. And yeah, that label, it looks a bit, big X on it. Irritant, apparently.
And that's going into the water.
Yeah.
Now, you see, this is where I'm confused, because I was led to believe that because I seen a label about 2 years ago. It wasn't as clear as that one you have there, but the one that I seen was hydrofluorosilicic acid.
Right. I don't know. Well, maybe if Patrick has listened to the show, he can clarify exactly if these guys are putting it into the water supply, if they've confirmed that. But it looks a bit ominous all the same. If they're putting that into the water, and if they are putting it into the water, and they're getting rashes and they're getting little burn holes in their uniforms, it's obviously like it's an acid. Obviously,
of course it is.
Of some sort. But that's quite interesting. But that's really it, for things that happen during the week. A few other things going on, but I mean, we want to get Andy on, and we want to have a chat with him about what he's been doing and what's happening. Now, Andy's been on the show before, as I say, about 3 years ago, and a lot has changed since Andy's been on. And Andy's just released a new book. He's a prolific author and lecturer, does loads of lectures and fantastic information as usual. And he's an all-round nice guy. Anytime we talk to Andy, we have a great conversation. So, without further ado, we're going to bring Andy in and we're going to crack on with that. Good evening, Andy. How are you doing?
Good evening. Great to be here.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks a lot for coming on, Andy. Much appreciated. It's been about 3 years or so since you've been on, but for people who don't know, see, I used to see you an awful lot on Edge Media TV, and you used to do a lot of lectures on there. So I used to see you quite frequently. Now that Edge and Controversial TV are now gone by the wayside, we don't get to see these speakers anymore like yourself. So for people who don't know you, can you just give us a quick synopsis on your bio and who you are, and then what we'll do is we'll crack on from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been researching over the years. Really, it started off with Unexplained Mysteries and, the whole UFO, crop circle, that kind of world. And then as the years went by, I got much more involved with investigating, the key issues about the control agenda, the whole conspiracy theory thing. And then conspiracy theory is a phrase I use without shame. There's nothing wrong with theorizing about conspiracies because they're real and they're out there. So let's talk about it. So I found over the years I've got more drawn to that. And then 3 or 4 years back I wrote a book called The Truth Agenda, which sort of put all of that together, the mysteries, the conspiracies, and what can we actually do about it. And I'm pleased to say that, really struck a chord with people. So that's, in fact, now in its 3rd edition, new edition of that out. But last year I thought it was time to really analyse the conspiracies sort of face-to-face in as much detail as possible. So I wrote a book called Conspiracies, the facts, the theories, the evidence, which is trying to pull apart, the myths of conspiracy theory and show people why it really matters. It matters that we talk about this. And, I mean, I'm lucky enough to be able to give lectures as well. And sometimes, obviously, it's for alternative groups, truth groups, but also, for some reason, I seem to get invited to quite mainstream groups as well. So what I'm trying to do is to share with as many people as possible through spoken word and through the books, the notion that, look, we need to look at what's going on in the world and we need to take it in our hands and actually be active, proactive, and do something about this. So that's what I'm doing, and that's who I am. And here I am now talking to you.
Brilliant, brilliant. And, okay, so let's take what's going on at the moment. Over the last 3 years, an awful lot has happened. We've had, the things like the Fukushima, and we've had certain the banking system, the collapse, things getting worse, people being repossessed, mortgages. It's happening in the UK as well as over here. Massive austerity, bondholders being paid off with odious debts which we shouldn't be paying from an Irish point of view. And over in the UK, you had your bedroom tax and various other things going on. And it looks like the general consensus from previous guests that we've had on the show is that the powers to be, or powers that war, we'll talk about that, is they're ramping up their agenda, and they're openly and blatantly bringing it out in public. I mean, we're beginning to see things now quite clearly what they're doing. Now, I don't know whether that is complete naivety or arrogance on their part, and they think that, George Orwell would have been very proud of what they're doing, but they, some people believe that they're making mistakes, and because they're getting desperate, they have their back against the wall, and like a trapped rat, instead of them putting their hands up and saying, right, that's it, we've had enough, you win, they will fight till the bitter end. So, I don't know what your take is on it.
Well, I think a very interesting development, obviously, in the last few months was the Edward Snowden revelations. Now, I know there are conspiracy theories about Snowden himself, but I think we can take it as read that, the basics of what he told the world are pretty much the case. Now, what I think is fascinating here, which, is answering your question in a roundabout way, is that, so initially there's shock. And those that didn't know, so, the people in the truth-seeking world, well, it's no surprise. But those on the outside, the notion that they potentially are being listened to, they're being monitored, their emails, their phone calls, that was a big shock. And there was a lot of indignation, a lot of upset about that. What, however, I think has been very interesting that has followed that is that after that initial shock, suddenly there's a huge collective shrug, and people go, oh, well, never mind, nothing I can do about it. And so, in a way, you could argue that, the powers that be, or New World Order, whatever you want to call them, the ruling elite, let's call them that, it's almost as if they're okay with the cat being out of the bag. They're thinking, yeah, okay, that's fine, because what are people going to do about it? And I think you're right. I think there's a certain arrogance there that they think they're basically invulnerable. They can now do anything they want. And they've seen, despite all the revelations from Snowden and many other things besides, they've seen people don't really act because they don't know what to do. They haven't got the time. They've got, money to earn, families to raise. So they've seen, hey, this is okay. We got away with it. Yeah. Now I think more and more stuff is in plain sight because they know that it's only a core of people who are going to fight the cause, and I think that's why it's very important that we expand that core.
Yeah, definitely. But I have noticed there are people now, especially with the fact of Prism, which is the technology that the NSA used to spy on people and still are. A lot of people now, and even the IT community, are kind of getting together and beginning to write software that will actually, encryption systems, encrypted browsers. I know Kim.com down in New Zealand, he's trying to, or putting together a system where it's completely encrypted that you can use, and they won't be able to track, they can get the data, but it's just they won't be able to read it. Now, we know what they say, they store it. And when they have the technology and the time to do it, that they'll go and look at it. But by then, hopefully, the powers to be would have, collapsed or at least been, defeated.
Well, I think also that there is this very strange atmosphere at the moment of, yes, of course, being defeated is one thing, but you've got to go a long way to defeat a system that is so entrenched. And what we're seeing at the moment is more and more attacks on the internet. So we've got, over here in Britain anyway, we've got sort of David Cameron saying, right, we must have now child protection. We don't want children seeing pornography on the internet, so they're going to, put this new rule in that you have to say whether or not you want it. But what they're not telling you is that buried in the small print, when you say, I do not want to view pornography on this computer, were you to say that, you are also shutting off access to a lot of what they call esoteric websites. Now, how do you define esoteric? But you can see there a very sneaky, a very underhand censorship beyond what they are claiming. And we're seeing more and more of this. I think, the attempted restriction of the internet at the moment is one of the most serious issues. And I don't know if anybody's been monitoring the news this week, but in Turkey has just basically introduced a law that can remove any website anytime they want. Which, of course, is very worrying because I'm sure a lot of other governments around the world would like to do that. So, the genie came out of the bottle when the internet became very widely available. And it's only now is the legislation starting to fall in place to try to put that genie back in. Now, yes, I'm very encouraged that there are people now trying to devise systems, their own internet systems, if you like, that will bypass that. But the danger is that the majority of people in the mainstream, they will be offered a very fast and a very slick service for all the mainstream sites, but they're going to find increasingly they have less access to the truth sites, to the sites that tell the other side of the story. And I think it's really crucial at the moment that we fight that we make absolutely sure that there is, equal access to everything. And at the moment, I'm afraid that the slide is towards the opposite, where they're hoping that we'll all just sort of wind up like on the fringe and will be seen as a pariah not to be messed with. So I think it's a very serious issue, and I think the freedom of the internet is something more people need to be talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, I was talking to Dinah Everett-Schneider last night regarding the Internet 2, which is what they're calling it. And the Internet 2, from what we've heard, is that it'll be a subscription service to websites that they will let you have access to, a bit like Sky TV. And if you want to set up a website, you'll need to go to the local county council and get permission to do it. So it'll be like getting a license or getting some application form that you apply to set up a website. I mean, that's just ludicrous.
Well, I have to say, it's a bit of a shame that it's only now people are starting to cotton on to this. I mean, back in the very first edition of the Truth Agenda, I was writing about Internet 2, so this was 4 years ago, and people already knew that this might happen, but what we're seeing now is it's actually starting to happen. Yeah, so that's the thing, it's very clever. It sells this as a marvellous thing, so look, subscribe, and you'll get all of these sort of websites, with very fast speeds, and it'll be fantastic. But what they're not going to tell you is if you want to see anything outside of that, you'll probably have to pay more, pay extra, it's going to be a question of not even being offered it in the first place if you want anything outside of that. And it would just become to many subscribers as if they don't exist. Because, if you've got to get a license for, say, a truth website, well, I'm sure we can all imagine just how much blocking of that there's going to be. So the truth websites will vanish off the main system after a while, leaving just the mainstream ones. I mean, it's a fantastically clever ploy because they never then at any point have to say, we are censoring the internet. But that's what it will be by the back door, and it's a very worrying development.
Well, there is Plan 2, which is what Greece did, and Greece started to set up their own mini network away from the internet, wireless network, in local villages, connecting villages up. And myself and Steve have actually looked at this technology to do it, and it wouldn't be that expensive to actually link up a few villages and have kind of a national network. It won't be the internet, but you would still be able to share information from village to village. And if you had multiple locations doing this, then there's no reason, like they have in Greece, that we can't do it.
Well, that is, of course, possible, and I hope people do it. And I think, the alternative internet, whatever you want to call it, I think will naturally evolve. But, I think where the concern is, though, is that you need to reach everybody, because just preaching to the choir is not going to be enough. Interestingly, I think we could see a return in time, if the censorship does keep increasing, to the importance of pamphleteering coming back. I've long said the printed word has not had its day, because in the old days of ancient revolutions, the first thing they would do is shut down the printing presses. Distribution of leaflets is still something that's very powerful, whether it be about fracking or 9/11 or whatever it may be. Leaving leaflets around can often actually have as much of an effect as putting internet sites out there. In fact, other people will find them that might never find the website. So, there are other methods of spreading information, but nonetheless, that shouldn't be used as an excuse, of course, of letting the freedom of the internet go. But yeah, we're under a real threat at the moment, and it must be fought.
And we need to educate people there, and just let them know what's going on. Again, carry on the waking of people up, waking people up to what's going on, educating them. And I was doing that during the week, a particular meeting that I was at, and again, asking them to provide the evidence they were stating. And basically, the government was saying, this is, wireless is safe, wireless technology, Wi-Fi is safe. And I was saying, well, I'm sorry, but the government are wrong, and we have the evidence to prove that. And I was kind of, without going into detail, that's where I was during the week, one of their meetings. But, Steve, you have a question come in for Andy?
Not so much a question, just a comment there that was made by Johnny on the People's Internet Radio chat. I just want to read it out because I find it very interesting. But Johnny says that Firefox is involved, speaking of the internet, Firefox is involved in trying to make a new internet. And he also says, this kind of, well, I was interested when I seen this because it's the Angry Birds. I don't know anybody who hasn't or doesn't play it. My young fella was playing
I don't.
it. You don't? Have you ever played it?
No.
You've never played it?
No. I've seen it, but not played it.
Right, okay. Well, the Angry Bird app sends all your data, like messages and contacts, to the NSA. They admitted this a few weeks back, and there's a link there. I've posted up on the chat, and if someone said it wasn't working, I've just checked it, and it is actually working. I'll repost it. But it says that this information was on an article in The Guardian, so... I don't know.
Yeah, that is quite true. That is actually quite right. And apparently there's a number of other apps and games which what you don't know is you're freely basically giving them all the information and more that they want. And Angry Birds, indeed, was one of the things that was tagged. So there's more to downloading something than we think. But yes, I believe that has been acknowledged as true. Yeah,
okay. Well, that's strange because Firefox, for example, that's an open source browser, so I'm very surprised at the fact that Firefox would be doing something like that. I'd expect more from the likes of Internet Explorer because it's obviously Microsoft. So
whether Firefox themselves would have sanctioned that, or whether they didn't realise this was what was going on, sort of somewhere in the coding, now that's another matter.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It may be the people in GCHQ and over in America, they've got means to do that without the person carrying the signal, if you like, even knowing about it. So it is possible Firefox are telling the truth when they say they didn't know, but that doesn't mean, of course, that it's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We just have to be on our guard. Again, so one of the programs I was looking at, because I was speaking to Gary, who was the producer over in the States last night, was telling me about a program called PF Sense. It's a firewall. But something that I've used before is a program called Snort, which is basically an IDS system, which is an intruder detection system. And it's free. You go to snort.org, the website, and you can download it, and it's something that we might look at because obviously security is going to be important to us here. Whether we can stick in another computer somewhere, I don't know, because it's just going to get bedlam with everything else that we have here. But I'll tell you what, Andy, let's have a quick chat about your book and what this new book is all about and where you're going in the direction with the content in the book.
Sure. What I find when I speak to people who are sort of on the edges of interest of the whole truth world, the conspiracies, is that very often people find it hard to really get to grips with what the big picture is. They're getting fragments. They're hearing, about everything from the reptilian agenda to 9/11 to then classic stuff like JFK and Princess Diana, and they don't quite understand where it fits together. So I thought what I tried to do was to kind of go right back to sort of the core of this. And what the Conspiracies book does is trace, sort of, if you like, the history of conspiracy theories. If we go right back to ancient times and the Roman times, and what you find is that when you go back to here, you've got so many things happening then that are similar to now. You've got the real origins of the false flag attack. You've got the state plainly working against the people and then blaming others. You've got an attempt to create a new world order. The Roman Empire was a new world order of the world that they knew at the time. So then you come up through the centuries and you get to Elizabethan times and the founding of the British Empire, and you find the same agendas going on. And you see there's a repeating pattern. And then, therefore, when you start to look at everything that's come about in sort of the last 100 years or so, it all fits together as pretty much a continuation of something that's long been an aim, which is to create a unified world state using oppression, using control agendas and surveillance. The technology may have changed, but the aims are much the same. And in amongst this, all the classic stuff that we hear about, whether it be moon landing, conspiracy theories, JFK, Watergate, whatever, suddenly you see where it fits. And when you can see where it fits, it's not fragmented. And you realize there's a kind of continuous whole there that leads you to a greater understanding of what's going on. Now, you don't have to subscribe to every single belief to see where it fits into the wider pattern. But what I've tried to do in the book is to draw all of this together and take you on that journey, and then, finally concluding with a long chapter about the New World Order. And it's, the actuality of what that is. Because one of the sort of accusations you sometimes hear is that it's the conspiracy world that's invented the New World Order. Well, that is a lie. The New World Order is a very real project, and it's something which is there in the record, named as precisely that. Famous people like H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell have called for the formation of one, written books about the New World Order. We've heard, of course, politicians. Gordon Brown was very well known for doing this, openly boasting of the need to create a New World Order. And then they turn around and they say it's a conspiracy theory. Well, it isn't. So what I've tried to do in the book is to show why it isn't, and show how the pieces fit together. And I think above all to, raise the issue that if the powers that be, or the powers that were, don't want conspiracy theories, they better show some pretty good evidence very soon that they're not true. Because it needs to be addressed. Because the fact that we now live in a world where so many people are convinced, for instance, that chemtrails are there to either suppress us or poison us or change the weather without us knowing, whatever it may be, the fact that so many people can believe that, and yet the establishment seems not to want to acknowledge it, is insane. We cannot go on like that. There has to be now an open debate on every subject, from chemtrails to the moon landings to 9/11, specifically 9/11, which of course is such a key issue. So that's what the book does. So, when I subtitled it, the facts, the theories, the evidence, it really does cover all of that. And it's trying to separate them and yet at the same time pull them together. And it's published by Watkins Publishing, who are, very renowned, and it is available in many countries around the world, which is great because it's reaching places where there's not that much information sometimes about this, that is coming from a place that is, like someone like me, that is to a certain degree more committed, shall we say, than certain books out there that are written by hacks or worse, skeptics. There's a lot of books out there purporting to be about conspiracy theory that actually are debunks. And you have to be very careful. But this is not, you're going to get the real thing here. And hopefully it will do some good.
Well, we've heard through the grapevine, and I won't mention any names, but we have heard through the grapevine that there are some people in the truth movement, and I think the reference was really pointing to America more so, that were actually being paid to actually promote fear to the people. And, to be, well, we know that we were talking about, Or was it last week we were talking about controlled opposition? Yes, we were.
Yeah.
Last week we were talking about controlled opposition and people involved in it purely because they're being paid or, they're part of the elite for whatever reason. And, it's hard enough trying to get the information out there and trying to get the truth because, as John Irwin said, he's an ex-super soldier. He said that when you bury the truth in a barrel full of lies, it's very hard to find. And they will mix the truth in with lies, and you just have to try and filter. You have to have a filter system on. And I think, obviously, what you're saying, we obviously haven't read your book, but it sounds to me like you're taking the bits of the jigsaw and actually helping people put it together.
Yeah, and I think that's really necessary at the moment. So, for sure, so there's nothing in here, okay, that you might not have heard about somewhere else. So I'm not inventing theories. What I'm trying to do is put them under a magnifying glass and pull the threads together so that people can, A, make sense of them and B, discern. Because you're absolutely right. There are sources out there that deliberately spread misinformation. There's no question about it. And I think some of the more bizarre theories that get put around, you do have to wonder whether they're not there deliberately to discredit the more serious theories. I mean, I find it interesting. I mean, you'll often see quite mainstream television programs about, say, China, and it's well recognized that there are people paid in China to put stuff up on the net which supports the state. There's a lot of people doing it, and yet we never seem to think that that's going on here. So, of course, there are people very actively working to undermine this from within. The problem then comes when, of course, the people that are very worried about this then fall into paranoia and start to accuse everyone and anyone of being that. And that's where, that's very difficult. Nobody, not you nor I, can say here, I am not a shill, and prove it. You can't. The only way you can know how you feel about the information you're reading, I think, is to see how it feels in your gut.
Yeah,
you
totally.
have to really learn discernment, and that's all you can do because, we're in a world that inherently is mistrustful, and the conspiracy world is all about trying to cut through mistrust. But you can't know, and all you can do is see what sits right with you.
Definitely.
And that's something that you have to kind of learn to grow with.
I think the spending years in research and studying this subject matter, you get a level of discernment, and you get to kind of, and even though, I've been aware of this stuff since kind of 2001, Steve a little bit later, and even after all them years, sometimes we still get caught out because what somebody says is so believable that you say, well, that is believable. I can really understand that is possible for something like that to happen, and then you find out a month or two down the line, or even sooner, that actually that wasn't true. So you have to really, even if it resonates with you, double check it. And try and cross-reference. That I tend to do a lot of that now. I will look at the likes of the Alex Colliers, the Tolaks, the Drakes, the Cobras, and a host of other Secure Team 10, Reverend Michelle Hopkins. There's so many people now that I will monitor kind of on a regular basis, and just go back and see what they're talking about, and see if anybody else is talking about it. And again, I know Steve you were saying you were a bit of a pessimist.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, when people used to ask me, was I an optimist or a pessimist, I used to say, well, I'm an optimistic pessimist. That kind of totally confused.
Well, I'm a pessimistic optimist.
Okay, you're a pessimistic optimist. And but something that you mentioned there about the empires, you had your Egyptian empire, then you had your Roman empire, then you had your British empire. But the one thing that's consistent with these empires is that they've all fallen. And any secret society throughout time that has been exposed never continued, never lasted. So the whole thing about what we're doing in the Truth Movement, as much as we can do, is get the information out there, and report what's going on. And we need whistleblowers. We need people to come on and tell us what's going on. Even secretly, we can disguise people's voices and record them, or meet them and record the conversation with them and then play it on the show. We're happy to do that with whistleblowers and get the information out there. And as I say, what you're doing, which is great with what sounds to be brilliant with the book, because a lot of people tend to know a little bit of the jigsaw. and they look at one part in isolation and they go, I don't really believe that. And it's only until they start putting the pieces together, which is obviously what you're doing with your book, then they kind of go, right, now I'm seeing a bit more of the picture that I didn't see.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know where something fits into, the wider picture, because if you can't do that and you're only taking something in isolation, I mean, that can lead to two things. A, it can lead to you not quite seeing exactly what's going on around it, which might give it the context you need to truly understand it. But the other thing it can do is drive you mad, because, if you can't see that it fits in with other things, you can obsess too much. I think you need to sometimes step back in this kind of world of truth seeking and see how you can be more effective. And you touched on something very important earlier on when you said about the spreading of fear, because I think there are sources that also attach this kind of theory to fear, and if you're falling more into fear, then you're becoming disempowered, and the more disempowered, then the less likely you are to do anything about this. Now, I mean, this is something I've written about in times past, and like in the new version of the Truth Agenda book, I spent quite a lot of time in the last quarter of the book saying what we can do that takes us out of fear, because it's all very well to list all the things that are wrong, but what are you going to do about it? Because if you're not going to do anything about it, it's probably just better to stick your feet up and stick the telly on and have a nice drink. Because there's no point obsessing and creating fear and making other people more fearful. Because if the very control agenda is fear-driven, which it seems to be, I mean, by creating fear, we are far more malleable, then if we fall into fear, they won.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we've lost. So we mustn't do it. And I think, anybody that's only spreading fear and not offering even a glimmer of solution, I personally always feel a little bit suspicious about that. There has to be an opening to, okay, what can I do? Sure, pessimistic, optimistic, it's sometimes difficult to be optimistic in the face of certain things, but you've got to sort of go beyond that to say, but I'm still going to try and do something about this, even if it's just talking to someone on the bus tomorrow. And that if everybody could do that, then you can push forward with this. So, the optimism should never be misplaced, but then neither should the pessimism.
Definitely. I think, for myself, I think I've got to the stage where I see information that's coming in purely as information. If people are reading the information and they feel fear, then they should stop reading it. Because I see it as information, but some people will literally see it and they'll just start kind of curl up in the ball and, I don't want to face the world. Unfortunately, how are we going to learn about what's going on if we don't read about it and we don't talk about it? But at the same time, we should be saying, right, here's the problem, but also here's a solution, or here's what you can do about it. Because when I originally woke up, after I'd spent 5 years kind of studying the negative, and I kind of got to the stage and I said to myself, you know what, we're stuffed. We really are stuffed. And then all of a sudden, within 2 weeks, something happened. I met a few people and they were very positive over things, and they showed me, they taught me things that I wasn't aware of. And I thought, hang on a minute, there's a solution here. There is a solution. And then from then on, I said, right, okay, that's what I'm going to be focusing on, and I'll be educating that as well. So I do think it's very important that if people are going to be talking about the negative stuff, you should always kind of say, well, okay, well, that's the negative stuff, but here's what you can do about it, and here's the good stuff. Give a solution, because I think it's very important. Otherwise, just spreading, as we say, the doom and gloom. There's enough people out there, and we know people by name, who will tell you all about the doom and gloom, but never offer a solution or never have any solutions.
And I think that's something else that's really important, is to keep high spirits, because, we're dealing with stuff that is inherently depressing very often. It often involves death and war and deception and pretty terrible things. But if you obsess over that, if that becomes your whole life and your every minute is just seeing what the next worst thing you can read is, you're going to damage yourself. And I think we have to sort of foster an approach where you say, okay, that's going going on. I'm going to do what I can to deal with that, whatever it is. But then, aside from that, you try and keep in, I think, a better state of mind. And you can laugh, and you can have a sense of humour. It's interesting, I was talking the other night to a guy in a quite well-known heavy metal, sort of, black metal band, and was having a conversation, and he was saying, the fact that in their worlds, there's so much darkness expressed in the music, and it's so kind of full-on and often savage. He said the odd thing is the actual people that do it, because they express it in the music, they're really nice guys. They're really good company. They're very jolly and happy very often, because if you then bring everything you're expressing into that music into your daily lives, it's too much. And that's the same with the conspiracy world, I believe. If you can't live a normal life as well, then it's gone wrong. And then you've fallen into fear. You are, by, definition, disempowered and distracted. And there is a balance. And it's not always easy. I mean, sometimes, you can, read whatever website you're looking at that day, and you read the list of the latest things. And it can put you under a cloud, but you have to pull yourself out of that and say, okay, so what am I going to do? And like I said earlier, if you're on a day where you can't do anything, and you've just got to go to work and get on with your day, well, then get on and have your day. There's no point walking around with a cloud, because you won't be effective anyway.
Yeah.
But there is a balance. There is a balance, and we all have to try to seek that, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. I think you can't do this 24/7. You have to do it in piecemeal. Take a few hours or whatever time you want to allocate. Do a little bit of study, a little bit of research, and then go off and go back and do your washing, your ironing, or cooking, or whatever you have to do. Get grounded. And go back and do your mundane daily bits and pieces. And then, after another day or two, go back, do a little bit more research. Because if you do this 24/7, you will end up in fear, and you will end up, going probably mad in some kind of shape or form. But when you were talking about the rock band and the music, I don't know whether this is linked, but I thought it was very good. I seen a video of, they were obviously doing a psychological experiment, and what they did is they had this cinema, okay, and they got all this biker gang like Hell's Angels, right, and he put them all in the cinema sitting down waiting for the movie to come on, and right in the middle there was a couple of spaces, right?
I've seen it, yeah.
You see it, yeah? And then, so these couples would walk in, boyfriend and girlfriend, and you turn around the corner and you see all these tattoo skinheads, bikers and everything else. And some people would turn around and walk back out, but some people actually went straight to where the seats were. And as soon as he sat down, all the bikers got up and clapped, because they were saying, that's the stereotype. We are not what you think we are, And I thought it was a very good psychological experiment, and it was very good to see. But Steve, you've got questions for Andy there.
Yeah, I just want to touch base when you were saying about the balance, about looking up all the stuff that we look up on a daily basis, and balance is definitely the key. And it reminds me of a story. During the war. Not so long ago, my wife said to me that she was concerned about me because she felt I learn stuff, as I'm sure Alan does, and I'm sure you do as well, Andy. And you share it with your partner or friends, and my wife was concerned that when I was sharing information with her, she's saying, Mike, how can you be looking at all this information and knowing all this information, or thinking you know it, and you're not going around the bend, you're not going to do lally? She said, because some of the stuff you're telling me, she said, I'm afraid to listen to you because it scares the bejesus out of me. And I just said to her, well, because it's all about balance. I said, if all you're doing, if I was just looking at the problems all the time, I probably would go around the twist. But I said, because like Alan and I, we're involved with so many people, and there's so many people that we can turn to, and fire off an email or a quick Skype. And these are people who are obviously, they know a lot more than we do, and they kind of, as Alan used the word, grounded. They kind of keep us grounded, whereby we're learning the problems, we're learning what's wrong with the world, but we're touching base with these other people, and they are offering solutions as well. So I think that is definitely very, very important, because I found that some of the information, even basic information, just about fluoridation, just that alone, I've shared that with some people that I work with, and some of them, they won't listen, they don't want to listen, and you can see, okay, that's fine, that's their prerogative. But one of the people who generally does take an interest in what I'm saying, they're showing signs now of that it's overload, and it's like as if it's frightening them. But I have to keep saying to them, this is just a problem, but there are solutions. It's not as if it's a problem and it's never going to go away. There are solutions, and we can deal with it, and that seems to work for them. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. We did have a question in from Chris, Andy, and it was he wanted to know your thoughts on the astronaut Ed Mitchell. Seemingly Ed Mitchell is with the disclosure people, but says he saw nothing on the moon. And Chris is just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody listening that's not sure of the context of this, Edgar Mitchell, who I think was Apollo 14 or 16, but anyway, one of the Apollo missions, he has gone on the record of saying, I mean, he's been quite sort of roundabout about it, but he's gone on the record of saying that a number of astronauts saw what they believe to be extraterrestrial activity during the lunar missions. Now, he's always been a little bit vague about what he himself has seen, but he's always implied, therefore, that there have been cover-ups in NASA. And, of course, some have argued, well, maybe that's why, for instance, they haven't told the whole story about the moon landings, which it's pretty clear they haven't, because maybe they couldn't show us what they actually found. But, of course, then you get, coming back to what we were saying earlier, the people that therefore say, well, Edgar Mitchell is himself a plant, because, what he's trying to do is seed, unreliable information in. And also then, for those, for instance, that believe we never went to the moon at all, it implies we did in a roundabout way. And it all gets very sticky. So, no, I mean, if I'm understanding that question right, what I'm hearing there is that he's saying, Edgar Mitchell was saying that he didn't see anything. From what I'm aware of, he's never specifically said he had a direct sighting, but he's talked about ones who have. But then, in the next breath, he has implied that he has. So it is all a bit tricky. But then, as we know, astronauts' testimony often is pretty contradictory. And we could be here all day on that. But, for instance, there's some astronauts who say that the stars were fantastically, brilliantly bright in space and it was amazing. And then you've got others that are saying, you could hardly see them at all. It was really disappointing. This is where you then have to say, somebody's not quite telling the truth here, but who's who? So I don't know the ultimate sort of decision to make here on where he's coming from, but he's certainly been hailed in some areas as a very brave astronaut for coming out with slightly more alternative views here. One just brief mention, I mean, there are some Russian cosmonauts who have actually been far more vocal than American astronauts about seeing claimed UFO activity. There's a lady called Marina Popovich, who was one of the early test pilots, for instance, in the Soviet Union, who I met at a conference in Peru some years back, and she was convinced. She'd, had seen things her colleagues had, and they were much more open about that kind of thing than the Americans have been over the years. So it's interesting. I think in Russia it's far less heresy to talk about that kind of thing than it is in America. But as for Mitchell himself, I can't say which side of the divide he's on, where again we have to try to discern.
Well, definitely. We had the disclosure meeting in Washington last year in May. Now, next week, fingers crossed, we're going to have Paul Hellyer on the show, who's the ex-defence minister for Canada, and he was actually at the disclosure meeting talking about it. And I just thought I'd throw that in regarding the exposure. Because they want to have disclosure about what's going on. I know in Mexico it's like second nature when they're seeing flying crafts and they're seeing things in the sky, and the Mexican government and the people are so used to it over there. But what I'd like to kind of touch base on, and I think it's very poignant because there's a lot of talk about it now at the moment, is that Mother Earth, Gaia, the energy changes on the planet and what has been supposedly predicted. People are predicting certain things. We had Comet Ison, and they were going to say, when Ison comes in January, the Earth is going to be bombarded for a week with fireballs. Now, there has been fireballs seen in America, but nothing compared to the doom and gloomers who were talking about, like it'd be like hailstones with fireballs. And so far, nothing's happened. We've seen one or two. And what they're saying is that there's energy changes taking place coming from the centre of the galaxy. Our DNA is going to be activated. We have 12 strands. We only use 2. The other 10 is going to be activated. And people, more and more people, and we talked about this just before we went live, people are beginning to suffer health problems. Now, they are saying that because of the energy changes taking place, that if we got a full-on energy, say energy beam or an energy from the galaxy came straight to the Earth and it was hit our bodies fully, we wouldn't be able to cope with it. So this is kind of subtle energy that's coming into the planet bit by bit. But
it's kind of like being lambasted with your Wi-Fi. If it hit you all at once, you'd be fried, but piece by piece by piece.
Yeah, so, but this is supposed to be good energy, but a lot of people are complaining. I mean, I know from January, I mean, myself and Steve, from January, to certain things that we've said, God, that's strange. Why all of a sudden are we having aches and pains, and not just old age, but other things as well. And a few of the people I've spoken to have said the same thing. Now, we're going to have JP on in a few weeks' time, and we're probably going to be talking about that with JP. But other people that I've come across said, yeah, and they've said, you go to the doctors and you say, I have a complaint about this, and 2 weeks later, the complaint is gone. So what's your take on the energy and the changes on the planet and everything else? What have you found out? What's your research show?
I mean, I think that takes us back to where we sort of left off when I was on, whenever it was, 2 or 3 years back, because of course then we had all the build-up to the whole 21st of December 2012, and I know that because the date came and went and it wasn't the end of the world, or there wasn't a sort of a very big event, a lot of people have turned their backs on that. I think that's a shame because, I mean, there's no question that, it didn't pan out as some people thought, but I think if you look around you, what you're describing there, I mean, many people are talking about this. You look around you at the time we've had since 21st of December 2012, there's no question there's been a shift. People feel different. There's so much that's coming out that have been previously hidden in the world, whether it be, the Snowden and, the Hillsborough, whatever. There's stuff like that. There's truth coming to the surface. But people are also feeling different. There are different shifts of energy. And the fact that we didn't just go in and bomb Syria, whereas I think some years previously we would have done when a vote was taken. There's a feeling that something is not the same. And so I think for that to manifest for people physically and in their own lives would make complete sense to me. I mean, it was interesting when I wrote my book, The Truth Agenda, originally. Obviously, it was all before 2012, so there was a lot of stuff in there saying what could happen. One of the themes was that it would probably be more gradual. So when I came to do the new version, which is obviously all post-2012, I was actually quite surprised at how little I really had to change because, all along, a lot of people felt that this would be a gradual shift. The 21st of December 2012 sort of pivot was only that. It didn't mean that's when everything happened. It was just almost symbolic. It was a shift of the ages. For anybody listening that doesn't know, there is a 5,125-year cycle that is referenced by many ancient cultures. I mean, most famously the Maya, but many others as well. And a lot of people think it is to do with some cosmic cycle. And you've mentioned stuff there about, the galactic center emanating stuff. Some people say that we're now in a position where we're more open to what's coming out. Some are saying, there is a black hole, a super black hole at the center, which periodically pulses these waves out. People like Dr. Paul Violette, he has his galactic superwave theory, which cosmic dust found in ice core samples seems to, back up that there are rhythmic pulses coming out, and that we're going through a particularly strong one now. So that never meant that we would experience some amazing thing all on one day. I mean, it seems to be that we're now in a time of transition. And, of course, one of the biggest things that any electromagnetic shift coming from galactic center is going to do is change the behavior of any given star that this wave passes through. So, our sun over the last 20, 25 years has broken records for sizes of solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and sunspot activity. And yet now it's gone very quiet, much quieter even than anybody was predicting, which of course could in itself be a symptom of shift and could lead us into very interesting places like global cooling, never mind global warming. So, to then imagine we wouldn't be affected by this psychologically or physically or on an energetic level, of course, is kind of very unlikely. Of course we will be. And I think a lot of people feel that something has changed. Something is shifting, and it's changing the way people think and the way they behave and the way they act, which of course collectively then passes itself on. And I think we're seeing this now everywhere. I think we're also seeing attempts to manipulate it, of course. But yeah, for me, the 2012 phenomenon has been borne out to be true, not in the very black and white way that some people saw it, but in terms of it was the beginning of a time when a lot of stuff would change rapidly. I can't see how anybody can say that is not the case. And yeah, it may be for different people, they're going to feel it in different ways. And all we can hope is that it's just us trying to adjust to something that ultimately, certainly according to some of the prophecies, will be a very positive, energetic shift, and we have to ride with it. We've got to ride the waves.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was watching some documentary on YouTube, and they were saying that the 21st of December 2012 was coming out of 10,000 years of darkness, and now we're actually and that was the cusp of what's going over now to there's the Bronze Age, Silver Age, and Golden Age, and we are now coming into the Bronze Age, where all the energy is going to be changing on the planet. And, I listen to people like Drunvalo Melchizedek, and he talks about this energy change and what's going to happen, or what he feels is going to happen. Again, nobody knows until it actually happens. And the likes of, say, Cobra, he talks about the event, this event that's going to happen. And then you have Nancy Leader from Zeta Talk, and she talks about things that's going on. And Nancy did talk about the likes of the sea levels rising, and she has maps. And then you had Edgar Casey, who was a prophet in the 30s and 40s, and George Michael Scallon, he's a map as well. He talks about, the water levels going up, and just the changes in the planet. Now, what we have been seeing is definitely the weather changes globally have been phenomenal. The snow happening, I think the snow in Hong Kong there the other day, and you've got snow in Cairo, and all this massive bad snowy weather that's coming down from the Arctic, from the North Pole down to North America. And we're having, you look at all the floods that are going on in the UK at the moment, we're having flooding over here in Ireland. We're having weather conditions that we've never really had before. Now, again, the argument here for people who are sceptical will say, well, how long do we have records? Well, we haven't had these global weather conditions since we've had records. That's probably the best way to say it. But they do say that this change has taken place before globally. 4 or 5 times apparently. And this is just Mother Nature doing what she does. And all these kind of sinkholes happening around the planet as well. It's just, there's major changes going on. There's definitely energy changes going on. I don't know. Again, myself and Steve normally say, look, if the powers that be or powers that war are being defeated, why are we still seeing chemtrails in the sky and planes spraying? That would be, for me, that would be a very good indicator that they have stopped and they have been taken over, when you don't see any more chemtrails being sprayed. And I'm still seeing them, and myself and Steve have said this. But maybe that's just me being a bit pessimistic, I don't know. But I have noticed there's people that are waking up that wouldn't normally wake up, or family members that would be asking me questions that they just, go back 2 years, they wouldn't even think about asking me anything about it. But now they are. So that is the kind of positive side of things.
Of course, one of the theories about chemtrails that's been put forward is that actually what they might be there to do is to try to actually prevent the worst excesses of the galactic superwave reaching us. Or, if you want to be very pessimistic about it, that actually they're trying to stop us getting the sort of the very welcome wash of energy that we need to evolve into our next state of super consciousness, which of course some prophecies say that mankind will be in an elevated state at the other end of the changes. So some people fear that somebody's out there trying to stop that. We can't say for sure what's going on there. But what we can say is, I think climate change, I think, does seem to me to be pretty clear. Now, absolutely, we don't really know for certain what the very long-term patterns have been. What is very irritating, though, at the moment is that, climate change, that phrase, is instantly, equated with meaning man-made global warming by the media. And I think the establishment is using this very well as a hook to, justify yet more sort of taxes and restrictions and all of that, when surely things aren't that straightforward. Now, even if you do or don't accept man-made global warming, which is, of course, a huge argument that I'm sure you covered before, the fact is there are so many other systems around us, and I think the fact that we've got a massive star sitting next to us that is going through a period of change that we've not certainly seen before, and that doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's just a cycle that, modern history has not gone through before, that is going to have a profound effect on climate, and therefore things like the jet stream, why wouldn't it shift? What made us ever think it was always in the same position forever? So it is very annoying when the mainstream keeps boiling it down to man-made global warming like a mantra. And as I'm sure many of the listeners know, the problem is they ignore the data of those that say there is something else going on. Anybody that says that and doesn't equate it with being because of man-made pollution is simply not included in the data. When they say, well, they're a maverick, they're no longer a scientist, which enables them then to justify when they say 95% of all scientists say man-made global warming is real. Well, yeah, that's because they don't include the scientists as being scientists anymore who say it isn't. So, this is part of the problem we're in. But I think, yes, certainly, climate change seems to be going on. Now, how widespread it's going to be, how long it will continue, we don't know. But, that phrase, climate change, can mean many things, and certainly we shouldn't be too black and white about it.
No, definitely. I think there is an awful lot going on. What have you heard from the fact that obviously this planetary change, and, do you look at other people like, I don't know whether you've heard of Cobra and Tolak and Alex Collier and Drumvlo Melchizedek and all these people.
Sure.
What's your gut feeling on the whole idea I don't know whether you've heard about the event, but what's your gut feeling? Do you feel that there is something coming down the line and, should we be preparing for it, or it's just a natural progression on what's going to happen to us that, we're moving, some people say that say Tolak, for example, talked about we're supposed to be in the fourth dimension by January. And we're now in February, and I'm not feeling any fourth dimension. Well, I might feel a bit demented, but I don't feel I'm in a dimension at the moment. But what's your take on it?
Well, okay, that sort of in a way takes me back to the 2012 phenomenon. So I've sat here and I've said for me there was something very real about it. At the same time, I also acknowledge that there is, quite a strong group of people who had their fingers burned by that. A lot of people had put an awful lot on that date.
Yeah.
And of course, it came and it went and nothing specific happened. That doesn't mean it was nonsense, but I would have thought that people might have learned lessons from putting too much on dates. Even aside from that, for the last 25 years, I've been involved with this whole world. And, back in the early 90s, I was investigating psychics and, took part in psychic circles and stuff like that to see what was going on. And back then we had the Ascension movement was just coming up. There was, that's now like a generic term, but back then it was a very definite that the world was about to undergo a huge shift and, the Ascended Masters, aliens, call them what you will, we're going to come and rescue, the top people, we're going to be rescued off the planet. Anyway, so I sort of went through all that then, and we had date after date after date go round, and the internet wasn't really up and running on the level that it is today. So a lot of this was stuff, either word of mouth or printed sheets, back to printed sheets again. But again, so many dates were put forward, and, I can't remember a single one of them ever being meaningful. But, looking back, there was a general sort of pattern to it that I think is being borne out. And it's almost as if what the Ascension movement was picking up on was where we're at now. There was an imminent change, a shift. But I think what tends to be the case is they're often far more subtle than people think. And I think it's a dangerous game by pinning dates to it all the time, because when the dates come and they go and they don't fulfill their promise, of course what you wind up with is more disillusioned people who then won't listen to the general sense of what's being said. And again, I sometimes wonder, and I'm not pointing the finger at anyone in particular, but are these dates deliberately seeded to actually discredit the general movement of there is a consciousness shift going on? Because every time you can disprove a predicted date and say, ha ha, nothing happened, you can then bring down the whole general movement by association, and that's a shame. So, listen, maybe somebody will come out with a date sooner or later that will be meaningful, but, you know, in the same way, I mean, obviously there's the Nibiru movement. Now, I mean, I can't say Nibiru's not there. There's some interesting discussion out there, but, you know, we've had a lot of dates for that. You know, Nibiru would be revealed on this date and that date, and on it goes, and then it was, I think, Comet Elenin. Do you remember Comet Elenin?
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, and then everybody said, oh, that's Nibiru, or even if it's not Nibiru, it's the forerunner of Nibiru, and it's going to do amazing things. And then, of course, Elenin just dissolves into a smudge of dust, and suddenly it's as if that never was, and then they move on to the next thing. And I think that doesn't help in the long run, because I think by getting so sort of excited about things and being so black and white, then you just risk disappointing people. So I feel people should back off the dates a bit and say, look, something could happen in this general time. I'll be happy with that, and I'm much more open-minded to that, you know, rather than put so much on something that then disappoints. And that, to me, doesn't do it any good in the long run.
Well, I just find that when you start looking at the dates, you're on this emotional roller coaster, and you're getting yourself psyched up, and you think, great, it's going to be this date, it's going to be this date, and nothing happens. And then there's another date, and you just want to try and avoid that. Now, people who are, maybe I feel, are genuine in the truth movement, tend to turn around and say, look, I'm not going to give you a date, because it's all based on windows of opportunity. It takes A to happen, then B happen, then C, and if B doesn't happen, then C is not going to happen. And so it's all based on what happens and when it happens for things to be triggered and to be, you know, to take place. And I respect that kind of approach more than giving the dates, because people will always look at dates. They'll always try and push for dates. So the people who don't give the dates, I'd have more respect for, because to me that's more logical than saying, look, you know, if they're having an underground fight or struggle with the powers to be, they can't guarantee that they're going to win certain struggles, or when they're going to win or lose. So they can't turn around and say it's going to happen this time or in that month, because we don't know whether we're going to defeat this faction of the powers to be. We might beat them, then again we might not. And so we're not going to give a date just in case. And this is kind of, maybe that's Cobra's approach to a certain extent. And he talks about the event. Now, there's a few things that I kind of disagree with. I mean, him having a little kind of survey on his website saying, you know, click here to vote. Do you want the event to happen now or not? You know, I mean, I thought that was a bit cheesy. I don't know what that was all about. But, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, I mean, I think that, yeah, I agree with you there. I can respect people more who are, if you like, very honest about the fact that they can't be sure. And then that's okay, and I think people can go with that. Or at least if you're going to give a date for something, I'd really like to know why it's going to be that date. One thing that often frustrates is that I think, okay, you're telling me this event or that event's going to occur on this date. Why that date? And actually often getting to what their reasoning for that is often very vague indeed. So that's a frustration. At the least it would be nice when the dates don't come to anything, somebody apologised or put out a notice saying, hey guys, all right, fair enough. But often when they do try to do that, they just give another date, and then that comes and it goes. So yeah, I think just a more general sense of encouragement would be nice, because I think there is shift. I think there is a momentum. from here, but let's not sort of rush it before it's ready. I think we'll all know. Here's the thing. I think if there was going to be a huge, massive event, if you look at the work that's been done with the science of collective thought and random number generators and seeing how we all seem to know when big things are about to happen, even before they do, I think we would know. I think we'd all feel something if it was going to happen. I don't think we'd need to be told by just one or two or three people. I think we'll all feel it. It's an interesting thing. I mean, if anybody listening doesn't know, like if you look at events like 9/11 or Princess Diana's death or the big Boxing Day tsunami of 2004, they're running this experiment. It's been running for years now, where they leave computers burbling away to themselves and they just churn out meaningless numbers. But what they've discovered is that when lots of people focus their thoughts on the same thing at the same time, they can make these computers create very definite streams of numbers. And it's been used as evidence that our minds, can affect the energetic environment around us, which can then affect machinery. But equally, it's showing that we're all tuning into things we don't even know that we are. And things like 9/11 and these big events, one of the really fascinating things is that the computers start to react and show a reading that is beyond normal before the event happens. I think with 9/11, it started to do odd things about 3 hours before the first attack. And it's been used by some people to say, we were all kind of, you couldn't have voiced it, but on some strange inner level, we knew something was going to occur. So if an event so huge, so massive, that it was going to change all our lives overnight were coming, I think we'll all feel it. And again, it comes back down to that learning to read that feeling in the gut of your stomach. There's a lot to that, And I mean, I give a lot of talks to, mainstream groups as well as, people like us. And what's very interesting is you get a very definite reading of when things are wrong. Like, for instance, Princess Diana or Dr. David Kelly. Now, you ask most people, do you think that they died, through accidents, or in Kelly's case, suicide, or do you think they were murdered? It's very interesting. Almost overwhelmingly, most people will do this funny move, go, oh, yes. And they'll touch their stomach, say, oh, definitely murdered. And these are people who are not reading truth stuff. They're not reading conspiracy books. They feel it in their gut. And I think that's meaningful. It's not always right, maybe, but worth tuning into. So, yeah, dates. Well, if I get that feeling in my gut as well, and then somebody gives me a date, I'll take it more seriously. But so far, it hasn't quite happened.
Yeah, but that's the trouble. I mean, I've seen quite a lot, done quite a lot of research on this, and I've gone through a number of people and looked at what they're talking about, and I do feel there is definitely a change taking place. As I say, we'll get JP on to talk about it as well on the show, but I am getting kind of a little bit impatient because I do feel that if something's going to happen, let's go ahead and do it. Let's move on, because the world is getting worse as things go on. The food is being poisoned, their rivers and water, the seas are being poisoned, their skies are being poisoned. We're being taxed more and more. I mean, something has to give. Steve?
What if we're all waiting for something to happen? What if this thing that we're waiting on is inside of every one of us? But it can only happen when we have inner peace. And when we have distractions like not only soaps and TV programs, but we have distractions fighting about chemtrails and water fluoridation. They're distractions as well. And I just wonder, what if we're all focused on these things when we should not focus on them at all, just as if they don't exist, and maybe then we will get this event. Maybe it's just a burst of inner peace that will come when we stop focusing on other things outside of ourselves.
Well, I do think sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, those that study positive visualization would absolutely agree with that. But it can go a bit too far the other way. I mean, there's books like The Secret, which has been a big hit around the world, which is very much about positive thinking. And I go with a lot of it, but it's also been criticized for then, at the same time, not being realistic, because you get them people that don't in any way acknowledge the darkness, and in the hope that that will just go away, which of course then just allows the darkness to do what the hell it wants to do when you're not looking. There is a balance, again, I mean, there really is. So, but yeah, no, you're right. I think, to me, it's striking the balance. You acknowledge what is wrong, but you do try and focus on what is right and what should be right. And, I mean, just to pick up on something, Steve, that you said there, I mean, we talk about the event coming. You are absolutely right. It's only going to happen if we all play a part. I don't believe in this thing where we're all going to be rescued or suddenly enlightened by some ascended master pressing a button on the big ship. I just don't believe that's going to happen. We don't even deserve it. Because if we don't make that change ourselves, how can we be a part of that? Nobody can hand you enlightenment. It has to come from us. So what we're all trying to do here, and I mean all of us, everyone listening, anyone that's tuned in to the shift of consciousness, we are playing a role. But it's, if you sit back and say, no, I'll wait to be ascended, well, I think you've gone off the rails, because no, it's not going to happen anyway. So, yeah, I think it's really important to remember that if there's going to be a shift, even if there is some event or some energy shift coming in, it is how we use it, it's how we, if you like, channel that through, that is going to make the difference. It's not just going to happen by itself.
Would this be the consciousness of the planet raising because more and more people are beginning to waken up and say, enough's enough, we've had it, that's it? Because I don't think you have to really go down the rabbit hole deeply. You just have to say, right, enough's enough, that's it, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm not playing this game. And maybe that's the conscious shift that has to take place. And when enough people in the world turn around and make that shift, that's when it's going to take place.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, picking up on something you said earlier on, though, I mean, we do, I think, have to try to cultivate patience, too. I mean, here's an interesting thing. Okay, so the world of astrology, of course, we'll talk about the astrological ages. I really believe there is something to that. So some will say, okay, we're going into the age of Aquarius. Now, there's many arguments about exactly when that happens, but there's a general acknowledgement it takes several hundred years. What's interesting is, if you go back to the beginning of the current age, we're just at the end of the age of Pisces, and it doesn't matter how you think astrology works, but here's just something interesting to note. There's a definite shift every 2,000 years, which is more or less when the ages shift, and we could get into the science of astrology, but that's for another time. Okay, here's the interesting thing. If you were to go back to, like, you know, the year 1 AD, you would see a world that was pretty set in its ways. You had the Greek gods, you had the Roman gods, you had, you know, power systems that looked like they were never going to go away and never change. But then that was the very beginning of an age. Now, 400 years later, suddenly everything shifted. The empires collapsed, the Roman Empire went, the old gods went almost overnight. Suddenly the Christian God arrives. The whole belief system shifted, but it took about 400 years, even though some would argue that, you know, they were already into that new age. It took a while. And suddenly, right near the end of it, you're off the cliff, and change is there. And I think it will be the same here. I think everything that everybody that's tuned into this is doing now is crucial and vital and must be done. But I think if we're expecting to see all the results within our lifetimes, we're probably going to be disappointed. My feeling is that although you might look around now and think, right, it's too slow, there's not enough shift, it's not quick enough, I don't know. You look back in 200, 300 years' time, and you might suddenly see the trajectory, and then suddenly it could all change, and everything we think is now so immovable, well, it might be not at all like that. But we've got to be patient. Yeah, I mean, I wish everything would be marvelous, but then that can lead you into that mindset of waiting for enlightenment, and it's just not going to work like that, I don't think. I mean, it would be nice if it would, but I don't think it will. And I think it is going to be far more gradual, but we still have to do the work. So everything that's being done now and all the spreading of the awareness of this stuff must be done. That doesn't mean we must then sit back and think, oh, well, I'll take it easy. No, but things take time. They always take time. You look back through history and you'll see, you know, you don't get a shift of consciousness overnight. It doesn't work that way.
I think it's a cliche, but, you know, they say, we are the change we are waiting for. And I think maybe that's what we are by, you know, the consciousness of the planet raising. Now, there's so many different arguments as to what, their perception based on, some people say they're speaking to, higher beings, and other people are speaking to angels, and other people are channeling somebody else. So there's so much going on. The one book that I read in the early 90s was a book called The Only Planet of Choice by Phyllis Schindler. And she was, I think Phyllis Schindler was a medium, and she was working with a couple of people, and they were hoping to channel in somebody, but they channeled in somebody else, a group of, superior beings, Council of Nine they were called, and they were talking about it, and they said Earth is a quarantine planet. It's like a prison planet, and it's a quarantine planet, and it's the only planet that's not connected galactically to the other planets, because we are such kind of Neanderthals compared to the other planets. And until we get to the stage that we actually realize who we are, and we need to move away from this violence and the kind of mentality that we have, and this, we need more love and move away from fear. And as you say, maybe that's the path we're on now. But I heard something about statistics. I don't know how true it is, that there's less murders now in the world, would you believe? I know we have wars, but there's less murders in the world now than there was going back thousands of years. So over a period of time, if you look at the statistics, there's actually less taking place. And maybe that's where we're moving.
Well, it's funny you say that. There was a book that came out a year or two back by Steven Pinker, who is kind of a renowned academic, but nonetheless, he's radical in some views. But he published a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, and he kind of, going against what most people perceive from watching the news, which is totally fear-bound, he actually demonstrates there are, in fact, less wars, many less deaths, many less murders, many things that have changed and improved just over the last 200 or 300 years. And he lays out how that is and says, look, you actually look at the trajectory of it. For all you may think the world is a very dark and evil place because that's what the media keeps telling you, in fact, the statistics do not back that up. And that's where you realize, of course, we are completely funneled to one view. You put on the news and you would think all that happened that day were the very worst things. But, of course, they're simply not reporting all the very positive stuff and the positive trends that are going on. And that's where you have to say we're kept in fear because, again, we're far more controllable that way. But, I think he's got some very interesting ideas there. But the point I was going to make was he's been attacked for saying that. It was like, of course the world's not like that. Rubbish. Of course it's terrible and evil and getting worse, because that's what people have been conditioned into thinking, and finding a way of thinking outside of that box, it seems to be quite difficult. So we've got so entrenched in thinking things are getting worse, we're not actually seeing the reality, which he seems to demonstrate with statistics, that things are getting better. So personally, I'll take his optimistic view, and it's something I would recommend people read, because, okay, you can argue with some of what he says, but the stats are pretty clear. The world is now a safer place to be in than it was. Now, that doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean it's sorted by a long chalk, and he's not saying that. But we're on the right lines. We've taken a path to something that might one day lead us to a world that's actually quite nice to live in everywhere. Long way to go, but, we're in the right direction.
Definitely, we have a long way to go. Now, I also am a big believer of karma. And I think, personally, from a scientific point of view, I kind of approach it that way. What you put out, you get back. If you're putting out negative energy, it's only obvious that cause and effect, it's going to come back to you. So, and I've seen karma happen, and apparently karma is supposed to be happening because, again, the energy changes on the planet. Karma is happening faster to people, faster than what we would think. And I think that's very important. And you have all this kind of neck nomination stuff that's going on, which is ridiculous. And one guy on YouTube, I believe, or maybe on Facebook, they posted it up on the videos, he decided to change all that. And the neck nomination was to do something kind. Now, to me, that's a much better way to do it, rather than turn around and have all these kind of concoctions where you can actually go and kill yourself, as 2 people in Ireland have died from it. I don't know whether people know that. Over here in neck nominations, 2 people in Ireland died from it because of stuff they put in the drink. So turn that around and make it a positive thing. But I am a kind of a big believer of karma. What's your take on it, Andy?
Well, I mean, I think, no disrespect, obviously, to your belief. I think karma is a loaded term because, of course, it's got very ancient religious connotations. I kind of go more down the George Lucas route on this. I think you're right. I think there is an energy rebound, and I think the actions that you do and the energy you give out in the end come back to you. And, I always think that the Star Wars films, it's a kind of all part of the big Hollywood machine and all of that, but they're very radical in a way, and the Force, I think, is not so far away from how it works, which is there is energy. It's neither good nor evil, but it's how you use it that matters.
Yeah.
And you can use it to its fullest for the good and become a Jedi, or you can use it to its fullest for the bad, and it'll still work, but you wind up as Darth Vader. And ultimately, it's your own undoing. And that is, if you want, that's karma. So, personally, I wouldn't use the word. No disrespect for those that do have that belief. That's, of course, absolutely fine. But in terms of what you give out coming back to you, I think it does work that way. And I think you're right. A lot of people say, it's like it happens almost instantly now. And that's a sign that you can't just store stuff up for other lives now, I think. What you're putting out there, you're going to get the effect back, I think, sometimes when we're not ready for it. So the more that we're aware of that, I think the more we'll take more responsibility for our actions. But equally, it works in a positive way. The more positive stuff, the more awareness we spread, the more truth, and more quickly that is also going to spread around and do something good. So, that's the plus side of it.
I think that's what we need to do. We need to spread, we need more love and less fear, because there's only two emotions in the world, and you either are fearful or you either are loving. And I think, one of the things I try and do is and Steve, I'm sure as well, Steve does it, is stay away from negative people or negative situations. And that makes my life calmer and much better. Because once you stay away from that, the energy vampires, they all have, it's loads of different names for them, but you know what I'm talking about, with people who suck your energy. And I tend to kind of stay away from that side of things. But we have about 10 minutes, Andy, left. So, obviously, it's great that we've been focusing on the positive stuff, and I'd like to continue that. And talk about more positive stuff that you feel in your research and what you've been studying it's positive to the planet and positive to people and what's happening.
I think one of the most encouraging signs that I see, and if I said this when I was on before, I apologize, but it's still true, so I'm going to say it again, is that the everyday person, normal people, they are seeing, I think, quite clearly for themselves what's going on. And it's now really unignorable. Now, obviously, then you get into the danger of what we mentioned right earlier on about the Snowden revelations, the collective shrug, which is, oh, well, what can I do? But nonetheless, there is, I think, now a new dawning awareness that actually we have been led down by bad paths, that actually we are governed by people that don't really have our best interests at heart. And I think certainly the older generations didn't want to believe that before. I think they were brought up with the notion of an establishment and a state that looked after them. And I do think that image has been pretty roundly shattered over the last few decades. And that, of course, on one level is unsettling and it's a bit upsetting, but on the other level it needed to happen. We needed to grow up and finally take responsibility and realize that every time we give power to people that may claim they have our best interests at heart but so plainly don't, we are in fact holding back things moving forward, because I think that by doing that we don't take responsibility to do a good action ourselves or do anything. Now that people are beginning to realize, and I see this at lectures and just the people that come up and talk to me, and they kind of say, look, I've heard what you're talking about, and I kind of knew that really. I just didn't know that you were even allowed to express it. The amount of people that say that in so many words is fantastic, because it means people now are aware that we all need to step up to the plate if we're going to make a difference. I think it becomes obvious by the day that the psychopaths, and, it's now quite widely recognized in the truth world that that's technically what they are, that are running the countries and the show and ultimately the ruling elite, they are egotists who are seemingly drunk on power. They have no interest in what happens to us beyond what they can get for money and for power and just keeping the whole New World Order thing going, whatever they call it. And now that's kind of obvious. And there's no excuse anymore. I think anybody that says, oh, I didn't know that was how the world was, they really must have shut themselves away now. People see it, but what they lack, and what I think that the truth world can do, is they lack a kind of a focus, a context in which they can see how they can make it better. And we need to say to people, here's what you can do. Even if it's just writing to your MP, even if it's showing up at your local fracking site and, showing up for a few protests, anything, you've now got to vote with your feet. And, I thought the fracking protests, listen, I don't know what listeners out there think, but it's pretty clear to anybody that really looks at the science of fracking, this is dangerous. It's going to poison the waters, it's going to ruin vast swathes of the British countryside if they do it here to the level they're saying. And look at the bribery. Over here they are bribing councils basically now to take it on. They are changing the small print, which means anybody that owns land, the frackers can come and do what they want, and you won't be able to stop them. Some, of course, say this is all part of Agenda 21. But that's another story. The point I'm making here, though, is that I'm massively encouraged by the amount of people who are actually saying, hang on a minute, there's something wrong. Now, people have been fooled to a certain degree into thinking this is marvellous and it's going to earn us lots of money. But, down at Balcombe in West Sussex, which is just a few miles up the road from here, there are some people who were out there every single day trying to block the lorries from coming in. And they weren't just the hippie campers the media implied. There were people from the Women's Institute there. There were local poets. There were local people who were there because they could see what was going on and it was wrong. And finally, they had an opportunity to make their voices known. And I think we're now at a stage where it is not enough just to complain and grumble. We need to get everybody out saying, well, you can make a difference, make your voice heard. And because they know within themselves that a lot of stuff is now wrong, they can't really live with themselves forever if they just keep looking at their feet and pretending that they can't make a difference, because they can. So for me, I look around me and I see this is where the shift is occurring. And it is uncomfortable for some people, and some people don't want to break up their cozy lives. But at the same time, they feel really in their heart of hearts that suddenly they know how the world works. And if you do know how the world works, you've got to do something about it. So that on one level sounds like a kind of a complaint. It's not. It's a very encouraging sign. And people now, I think, are beginning to realize that you can't wait for somebody else to give the solutions. We've got to do it ourselves, which comes back to what we were saying earlier on. Neither the Ascended Masters nor David Cameron are going to make our world right for us. We have to get out there and start doing it ourselves, even if it's just in our family life, changing the environment around us, talking to colleagues, people on the bus, whatever it is. It all has a domino effect. And that's very powerful. And I think people need to remember how powerful the domino effect really is.
Well, it's the 100 monkey syndrome, isn't it?
It is, and we were talking earlier on about the consciousness experiments, and if anybody reads the Truth Agenda book, I try to give a lot of examples of how this has been proven to work, and it works. Focused intention and thought has a real difference, which I always think is interesting, because the academic elite of scientism that seems to have us in its grip in the mainstream media, of course, debunks all of that savagely. And, of course, that suits the establishment to make everybody think we are powerless. Well, I think the science of collective consciousness is showing absolutely we are not. And so not only what you do, but what you think is creating a whole new zone of consciousness, an entity in its own right. Call it the new sphere, whatever you want to call it. It's beginning. It has begun. And I think the internet was a big part of that, because the internet has managed to focus a lot of like-minded people, and now we can share ideas very quickly about things you could never have shared so quickly, even 20 years ago, which is another reason why the state wants to shut it down in terms of its freedom. So, we've got to make absolutely sure that tool also for focusing consciousness is still available to all and is used for the best. But it's there, and at the moment it's there. We can all use it. Let's use it while it's there.
Exactly, totally. Steve?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to put you on the spot, Andy, but if you had to look 5 years into the future, do you reckon in 5 years' time we could be still having the same conversation as we're having now, or do you reckon things will have changed or moved on? Do you reckon things will be better, or will there just be something else to fight against?
Well, I think that we will still be having this conversation, but I think what will have happened, I suspect by then, is that it will be far more focused. It will be much more in the public eye anyway, and you can bet your life that the establishment will really have, got its grip in on trying to shut down these avenues of truth, because that's, what I'm saying here. If we don't start to fight like the internet legislation and stuff like this now, or create our own networks to counteract it, we're going to get caught out later on. I think there will be a much increased polarization between those seeking freedom and those seeking to control us. And I think, so yes, the same issues will be there, but it will become far more clear, I think, for everyone to see, and far more dangerous as a result. But it's a long, long process, and we do need to beware. I mean, there's a lot of technology coming up that offers amazing things, but also offers terrible things. I mean, look at drone technology. The world of Terminator is not so far away. And, it would be very easy, as we've now seen, to control the flow of information, to shut people down, as you seem to be encountering, if they're not saying the right things. We must fight that. We must make it so intolerable for anybody to do that, any nation, any state, anyone, that it's no longer acceptable by the general population. So, yeah, I think in 5 years' time we will still be having this conversation, but the tools for making a difference will have been enhanced or shut down, depending on where things go. And I think the tone of the debate will have moved on, and it will become all the more urgent. And so, yes, I'm an optimist, but I do recognize the urgency for everybody who cares to do something, anything now, whatever that may be that you choose to do.
And just in relation, when you say things getting shut down, what about the internet? Do you reckon in a couple of years' time, we'll say 5, do you reckon we'll still be communicating through the internet? Do you reckon that will be highly censored, and it'll probably, technology will go backwards in a sense that we'll be either communicating what we're communicating now with other people through bulletin boards, or will it go back to printed media and stuff like that?
That will come down to whether or not we do get to the stage where, you have to get a license for certain kinds of websites, or whether a new internet system is in place that simply doesn't give a voice to the likes of yourselves here tonight, because that's the danger, is that people won't even notice that it's happening. They'll go, oh, look, the new internet, call it Internet 2 or whatever. Isn't it marvelous? Not realizing what they no longer have access to. And so, we've seen in China how easy it is to censor the net, just simply make certain websites not available. Now we've got countries like Turkey just inventing laws to shut down any website they like. So, it's already happening. We've got, in America especially, you've got a bunch of neoconservatives implying that any truth issues website potentially is encouraging terrorism. So the more they can make the world out there be afraid of people like us and think that we might be terrorists instead of actually, as you and I know, trying to make a difference, then they will encourage people to think, oh, yes, I only want the mainstream internet. I don't want any of that nasty stuff. It could be dangerous. And that's the clever thing they'll do. They'll streamline people people with very fast things and marvellous things that make it seem like, we don't need the rest of it, but it will shut the door on the kind of stuff that we do need to share if we're not careful. So that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario would be if enough people don't let that happen in the first place, keep fighting, and hey, listen, if we have to start printing leaflets again and leaving them on tube trains, well, we will, because that worked quite well with the 9/11 truth movement, for instance. And you've always got print. If all else fails, print.
Yeah.
So all will not be lost, and indeed the spoken word of mouth.
Definitely, we'll have to do that. We'll just have to see what happens, I think, and maybe in a couple of years' time, or maybe next year, we'll get you on again. But we've reached that time, Andy. Just a big thank you for coming on the show. Brilliant information as usual. Again, as I say, maybe next year or the following year we'll get you back on and we'll get an update and see where we are. But I'm going to pass you off to Steve. Steve's going to do a roundup and get all the details off you there, and then we'll take it from there. But again, thanks for coming on. Over to you, Steve.
Andy, thanks for the information. It's been brilliant information as usual, and you deliver it in such an articulate way. And you didn't use any big words that I didn't understand, so thanks very much for that. Always a pleasure. Andy, can you just give people your I know that you give the book a plug anyway, and if you have the website as well, just let people know where they can find out more about Andy and his work.
Sure. The website is, if you go to truthagenda.org, so truthagenda, one word, truthagenda.org, you'll find about where I'm speaking, if there's any talks coming up. You'll be able to read about the books and find out, what's going on, any interviews like this coming up. If people are interested in the books, so there is the Truth Agenda, third edition out now, which mixes in more of the consciousness research, unexplained mysteries, and the truth-seeking stuff. And then there's the book Conspiracies, the facts, the theories, the evidence, which we spoke about earlier on, which, tries to give context to everything that we're talking about here in a mode that anybody will be able to read. If you're already into it, it'll help focus it. If you're new to it, it's not going to frighten you off. It's accessible enough that you can share it with people. So, go to truthagenda.org and, if anybody's interested in any aspect of my work, they'll find it there.
Brilliant stuff, Andy. That's fantastic. Okay, we're just going to go off to a musical break. Steve will explain what this song is after the actual break. But for now, Andy, just stay with us there for a minute, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
And we're back. And now just a little explanation. I know normally we play something a little faster, normally by our good friend Alan Carna, ETUK, but that is a song there by Donald Coughlin. He's actually a neighbour of mine, a very nice gentleman indeed, and that song is Country Living Blues. And Donald he wrote the song himself. He's a writer and he's a singer, and he's just trying to get his music out there. So I did say that if he gave me a copy of the couple of his tracks there, that we would play them. So that is, again, Donald Coughlin. Check him out. He's on Facebook. And it's but that other music place as well. SoundCloud. I think it's SoundCloud. You can check him out. That's Donald Coughlin. Coghlan. Country Living Blues. That one's especially for you, Donald. I hope you're listening in there. Alan.
Brilliant stuff. All right, Steve. No worries. We've just a few minutes left. So just a couple of things we're going to catch up on. Don't forget the Alchemy event. The name has changed, but it's basically, the Alchemy event in April coming up with Tony Z. Loads of guests on in the UK. April 11th, I think, to the 13th. Over a weekend, 3 days. So that sounds pretty good. Great speakers there. Check it out. I'm actually have to try and get the website and I'll give it out there. But if you go over to synchronicity.com, or there's a banner on their site, so you can actually have a look at it there. Go into the event section, the menu at the top of our site, go into event. The information is there, you can check it out. Now, next week's guest, we are hoping, we have it booked in, but there's never any guarantees. But next week's guest, I'm sure you all know, is a chap called Paul Hellyer. And Paul Hellyer is the ex-Minister for Defence in Canada. And he was at the Disclosure Project in May last year in Washington with Gary Heseltine and a few of the Stanton Friedman and a few other people exposing the whole kind of disclosure of ET and everything else. And Paul's just released a book, and he's going to be coming on the show, telling us about his book, and he's going to be telling us, well, what he knows and what he come across, because he was in a position of power that none of us have ever been in, and he is privy to information that we've never come across, we would never come across. So he's one of the highest ranking ET witnesses of evidence in the world at the moment that has come out and talked about it. So it's going to be quite interesting. Now, next week, unfortunately, we're not going to have Steve with us. Steve is preoccupied.
I'm going to be found in me garage with a nail gun. Let's hope we don't fall. Let's hope we get actually Paul Hellier comes on.
Yeah.
And he's not found somewhere. Anyway, yeah, sorry. I'm apologising in advance. I will not be here next week. I may as well tell you all. It's my young son. He's just graded to his yellow belt in Taekwondo, and there's a competition on in Cork. That's way down south where the floods are happening. Actually, I might be here next Sunday. If Cork is washed away, and I'll have nowhere to go, so I may well be here. But yeah, so that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to be in Cork watching my young lad either getting the sugar kicked out of him or kicking the sugar out of someone else. I don't know.
That's one thing you live. Well, it's a very rare thing. I don't think I've ever said it in 3.5 years. The words Alan and holiday all in the same sentence.
No, you haven't.
I haven't.
Although you have used the word Alan and sabbatical.
I have, yeah, I've used sabbatical. I took 3 weeks off. I needed to take 3 weeks off and charge the batteries, which I did, and Steve was taking care of and flying the ship at the time.
3 weeks. You must have had it on trickle charge.
And I'm still not charged, so I have to go out and charge again.
Yeah.
But, so that's the guest that's going to be on next week. Thanks to everybody tuning in. We will get the podcast up and running as soon as we can. Coming on after OYM, after us tonight, you'll be hearing the People's Internet Radio. I'm not too sure who's on the actual show tonight, but I'm sure it's going to be very good, whoever it is anyway. And they're doing a good job up there, over there, and doing a few bits and pieces. Now, we got Mary to do a few voiceovers as well. We've another couple of voiceovers to do and get Mary to do it on OYM and add them in. Which we hopefully we'll do that during the week and do a few things. But otherwise, that's really the news. What's planned during the week? Do you have anything planned during the week, Steve?
Well, Monday to Friday, I plan on getting up about 6:30 in the morning, going to work. That'll be about it. Now, I'm just going to keep an eye on things. As I say, that thing about the royal family that I mentioned at the top of the show, that kind of has me. I'm interested, you know. I mean, I'm not interested in the British royal family per se, but I'm interested, as you were saying, about 10 kids that went missing, and various employees are saying, little bits of information, and then they're trying to get a veil of secrecy pulled over them to kind of keep them out of the public eye as far as scrutiny and scrutinising their business is concerned. I'm interested to see how that all pans out.
It is very interesting when you start looking into it and start investigating things, you know. But okay, well listen, we're going to let the folks over at People's Internet Radio take over the stream, and they can kick off at 9 o'clock. And we've only got near enough a minute left anyway. So from ourselves, take it easy, stay safe. This is Alan James, and if you have any news or links, send them over to us. We did get a few links in during the week, and I'm going to try and catch up with them as well. But if there's any information, send them over, and then we'll obviously send stuff out through the web links. Now, as I say, if you're not a registered user, I'd recommend you coming on and just registering for being the site, because there's loads of information in the site that only registered users can see. And when I talked about the actual label and the that was sent over by Patrick, that's there as well. You can have a look at that label and the information as well. So check it out, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the information that you find as a registered user. But as I say, for the time being, take it easy, and we'll catch you again.
And don't forget our Facebook page as well. I'd almost forgotten about the Facebook page. And just there today, this afternoon, I went on and had a look at the OYM Facebook page. There's a lot of people on there. We have a lot of people following us on that. So, I mean, I know with social media and blah, 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 say what you want about it. But it's just another avenue of getting the information out as well. Okay, the website does it, but it's another form. So check that out as well. Anyway, just up to 9 o'clock here. So I'll say good night. I won't talk to you next week, so I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. From myself, Stephen George. Good evening.